Stuhal, min friend, and welcome to another video. We have found ourselves in very strange times, my dear friends. At the times when a lot of discussions have arisen about the nature of adaptations, and of course, about the Rings of Power, and whether it is an adaptation or not. And, well, we have stated many times before that it isn't. But the defenders of this vile show have gone as far as to, well, saying very unpleasant things about Peter Jackson and his trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, and of course, even more so about The Hobbit, which was not as successful or as good as The Lord of the Rings trilogy. However, I am here to prove to you that it is still 1,000 times better adaptation than The Rings of Power on Prime Video. I shall use an example that is, I would say, the best part of the Hobbit films that was not included in the book The Hobbit. However, I shall use material from the appendices to The Lord of the Rings as well as the Silmarillion, from which Peter Jackson took a lot of material to include in the Hobbit movies. Of course, there are a lot of things that came out of his own mind, such as Tauriel. I will not like Tauriel until the end of the world, and I think that this is shared by many of my viewers and listeners. However, I always say that if one is making an adaptation, it is important, crucial, and essential to respect the law, keep the law, and quote-unquote the message that the original work of art included. Now, I want to talk about the chasing of the Necromancer from Dol Guldur, Sauron, basically, and his struggle with the White Council. Well, of course, for those of you who don't know what the White Council is, it is a group of the wise. It was formed in 2463 of the Third Age of Middle-earth, and it was formed as a response to the growing danger of Sauron, of course. And the council then included the most wise, the wisest of the Eldar, Galadriel, Gil-galad, Círdan, and Elrond, of course, as well as the two most powerful of the Istari, Gandalf and Saruman. To support this, I shall read out a passage from the Silmarillion. Ever most vigilant was Mithrandir, and he it was that most doubted the darkness in Mirkwood, for though many deemed that it was wrought by the ring-wraiths, he feared that it was indeed the first shadow of Sauron returning, and he went to Dol Guldur, and the sorcerer fled from him. And there was a watchful peace for a long while. But at length the shadow returned, and its power increased. And in that time was first made the Council of the Wise, that is called the White Council, and therein were Elrond and Galadriel and Círdan and other lords of the Eldar, and with them were Mithrandir and Curunir. And Curunir, that was Saruman the White, was chosen to be their chief, for he had most studied the devices of Sauron of old. Galadriel indeed had wished that Mithrandir should be the head of the council, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Mithrandir refused the office, since he would have no ties and no allegiance, save to those who sent him, and he would abide in no place nor be subject to any summons. But Saruman now began to study the Lord of the Rings of Power, their making and their history. Now, as you can see or hear, this is precisely what the White Council in The Hobbit looked like when they met there. There was Gandalf, there was Saruman, there was Galadriel and Elrond, and Saruman was quite obviously the one in charge, the one who was against the idea that there was some sort of necromancer in Dol Guldur, and that necromancer actually is Sauron. He wasn't against the idea that there was a necromancer, but that the necromancer was Sauron. But gradually, of course, it so happened that the secret was revealed, and they assailed Dol Guldur and drove the Necromancer out of it, as was depicted masterfully by Peter Jackson in the Hobbit films. It was driven out by Galadriel with the help of Elrond and Saruman and Gandalf. And I shall then read out passages from the Silmarillion and then provide you with specific dates from the appendices to the Lord of the Rings, which correspond with the individual cases and scenes from the films, which go from Gandalf going to Dol Guldur for the first time, meeting Thrain there, as he mentioned, if you remember, at the beginning of The Hobbit, that it was given to him, the key to Erebor, so he can give it then to Thorin Oakenshield. And then, of course, throughout the Hobbit story or the film, Gandalf left multiple times, well, to tend to other matters. And those matters was, of course, mostly dealing with the Necromancer and Dol Guldur. So these events are then described in the appendices to the Unfinished Tales and the Silmarillion. But I will mainly and chiefly focus on the appendices to the Lord of the Rings. Do you know why? Because this is material that Amazon has available, that they acquired the rights to use in the Rings of Power. And I will show you that just by using the appendices, the notes, the short chapter at the end of the Lord of the Rings, to make a good adaptation. The dates with a description of the events that happened during these years then go 2060, and we are talking about the Third Age. 2060, the power of Dol Guldur grows. The wise fear that it may be Sauron taking shape again. 2063, Gandalf goes to Dol Guldur. Sauron retreats and hides in the east. The watchful peace begins. The Nazgul remain quiet in Minas Morgul. 2460, the watchful peace ends. Sauron returns with increased strength to Dol Guldur. 2463, the White Council is formed. About this time, Deagle the Store finds the One Ring and is murdered by Smeagol. 2845, Thrain the Dwarf is imprisoned in Dol Guldur. The last of the 7 rings is taken from him. 2850, Gandalf again enters Dol Guldur and discovers that its master is indeed Sauron, who is gathering all the rings and seeking for news of the One and of Isildur's heir. He finds Thrain and receives the key of Erebor. Thrain dies in Dol Guldur. 2851, the White Council meets. Gandalf urges an attack on Dol Guldur. Saruman overrules him. Saruman begins to search near the Glenfields. 2890, Bilbo, born in the Shire. 2941, Thorin Oakenshield and Gandalf visit Bilbo in the Shire. Bilbo meets Smeagol, Gollum, and finds the ring. The White Council meets. Saruman agrees to an attack to Dol Guldur, since he now wishes to prevent Sauron from searching the river. Sauron, having made his plans, abandons Dol Guldur. The Battle of the 5 Armies in Dale, the death of Thorin II, Bard of Esgaroth slays Smaug, Dain of Iron Hills becomes king under the mountain, or Dain II. Now I shall read out another passage from the Silmarillion to support these claims, and go more into depth. Now the shadow grew ever greater, and the hearts of Elrond and Mithrandir darkened. Therefore on a time Mithrandir at great peril went again to Dol Guldur and the pits of the sorcerer, and he discovered the truth of his fears, and escaped. And returning to Elrond, he said, "True, alas, is our guess. This is not one of the Ulairi, as many have long supposed. It is Sauron himself who has taken shape again, and now grows apace. And he is gathering again all the rings to his hand, and he seeks ever for news of the One and of the heirs of Isildur, if they live still on earth. And Elrond answered, In the hour that Isildur took the ring and would not surrender it, this doom was wrought, that Sauron should return. Yet the One was lost, said Mithrandir, and while it still lies hid, we can master the enemy, if we gather our strength and tarry not too long. Then the White Council was summoned, and Mithrandir urged them to swift deeds, but Curunir spoke against him, and counselled them to wait yet and to watch. For I believe not, said he, that the One will ever be found again in Middle-earth. Into Anduin it fell long ago. I deem it was rolled to the sea. There it shall lie until the end, when all this world is broken and the deeps are removed. Therefore naught was done at the time, though Elrond's heart misgave him. And he said to Mithrandir, Nonetheless I forebode that the One will yet to be found, and then war will arise again, and in that war this age will be ended. Indeed, in a second darkness it will end, unless some strange chance deliver us that my eyes cannot see. Many are the strange chances of the world, said Mithrandir, and help oft shall come from the hands of the weak when the wise falter. Thus the wise were troubled, but none as yet perceived that Curunir had turned to dark thoughts, and was already a traitor in heart. For he desired that he and no other should find the great ring, so that he might wield it himself and order all the world to his will. Well, and the rest is, as they say, my dear friends, history. As you can see, if you look into the source material and look then at the Hobbit films, Peter Jackson, as far as the chasing of Necromancer from Dol Guldur, went deep into the source material. And his luck was that from what we could see on the screen, he was able to draw from the Silmarillion, the Unfinished Tales, and the appendices to the Lord of the Rings. But if we only look at the appendices, it would be quite enough to use only them if we then compare it to what happened on screen in the Hobbit films. And if we look past the lore, if we really look at the film as a standalone work of art, those scenes when Gandalf was in Dol Guldur and then Galadriel came and she used the vial with the light of Arendil, and then Elrond and Saruman came to her aid, and then the ring wraiths appeared. Oh boy, and then Sauron, and then she changed from, the hot Galadriel to the vision of herself that she would look like if she possessed the One Ring. Oh boy, that scene. Come back to the void from whence you came, nameless. Don't tell me that particular passage or scene in the Hobbit films wasn't perfect. And that's why I say that some of the fan cuts of the Hobbit films are worth watching. I need to watch some of them. And that is one of the scenes that I would keep in. Well, of course, if we looked at the film not only as The Hobbit, but as a collection of stories written by Professor Tolkien, this would be one to be kept in. So this was a video just to show you that good adaptations can be made with tweaking, changing, adding, omitting things here and there, but one needs to love the source material, one needs to be passionate, one needs to know what one is doing, and definitely not coming up with what, well, is very likely to be almost 100% of their own stories as of making of this video from what we can see in the Rings of Power so far. So once again, I love this particular sequence from the Hobbit films, and I am very happy to rewatch it over and over again. Just this scene. That you don't have to watch the entire film, but this is definitely worth it. Alright, my friends, let me know in the comments down below what you think and what your favorite scenes from the Hobbit films or the Lord of the Rings films are. And that will be all. Thank you very much for watching, and Marie.